Hello and welcome to episode 170 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we are previewing CDL Major 3. The third major of the 2025 Call of Duty League season is almost upon us. And before we get to the tournament, we would like to talk about some of these matches, which Bink said on the last show he was getting fired up multiple days before the tournament was even set to begin. So we will definitely have a lot to talk about. But before we get to any of it, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Like you said, really excited. Since I saw that bracket, I've been looking forward to all these matches. Which, with the Ego Chall curse in there, that inevitably means something is not going to go as we anticipate. But that's the beauty of all this. So I'm ready to jump right in.
The last two tournaments we've said, I think it's going to be pretty chalk. It seems pretty straightforward in the winner's bracket. And then the number one seed loses and everything gets thrown off of track. So, like you said, there's probably some kind of curse there, whether it's the Ego Chall curse or whether it is the number one seed curse. But yeah, and I should mention before we get any further, this is a day earlier. You didn't get your days mixed up. Bink texted me last night saying, hey, do you want to do it a day earlier so people have another day to kind of listen to the preview before the major? And I think that's a great idea. I think that we probably should do that for Major 4 as well. Do the major preview on Tuesday live show so people can at least have more than a few hours to talk and listen to what we're talking about before it actually begins. Major 3 preview, let's get started. We talked about quite a bit on the last episode, but I think the match that both of us, I don't know if this is like the most exciting match, but it's certainly one of the more intriguing ones just simply because of how things have been working out lately. The Los Angeles Thieves versus the Carolina Royal Ravens. This is the 1 versus 8 matchup, and it's not necessarily, I'm not interested in it because I think that an upset could happen. Well, obviously it could happen, but I don't think it's likely by any means. And I just really want to see if Carolina is able to kind of break out of whatever spell LAT has on them. We just saw this match literally 2 days ago. I think this was the last match, I believe, on Sunday. And it was like most of the LAT Carolina matches, a complete stomp, and it was very one-sided in favor of LAT. Is this match of interest to you, or are you just kind of expecting Carolina to get dominated once again?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes to both of those questions. Realistically, I think, outside of the number one seed actually being cursed this year, this should be the most lopsided match in the first round of the winners bracket here at Major 3, but I am really excited for it still, and this is part of what I was talking about last episode is I don't have the numbers in front of me for like what maps Carolina and LA Thieves have played hardpoint on in particular this year, but we went over it last episode. Like they have like 600 and something points in 6 hardpoint maps against LA Thieves this year, and I know they just played them on Hacienda, I believe, in this last match with Rex, if I'm remembering correctly. But regardless of what, outside of them having already played Thieves on every single hardpoint map, which just with the way vetoes work, I just don't think is likely. I really want to see Brian Saints try to throw a curveball in the vetoes here and just switch something up. Now, on the other hand there, I could see Slasher just being the vocal leader type of player that he is. He could be opposed to that idea in the sense of like if there's a map that he knows the team hasn't been playing well or they have like an auto veto or something, I could be like Slasher, just be like, no, I don't want to do that. That's a stupid idea. So obviously there's definitely some factors that go into it, but let's just say for that I'm pretty sure they did play on Hacienda, so I'll just use Vault as an example. I believe they played on Vault already, but let's just say like Carolina hasn't been playing well on Vault Hardpoint, and they haven't played Thieves on it yet. Unless Vault is literally Thieves' best map, maybe you just throw a curveball in there and try and have Vault as your hardpoint pick, but at the same time, like, like I said, there's multiple factors there, because if you're picking a map that Thieves are really good at and you're already getting stomped in hardpoint by avoiding that map, then things probably aren't going to change. But at the same time, they just, things can't get worse for Carolina in terms of how the hardpoints have been going in this series. So I will be interested to see what the vetoes look like, and if there is some sort of switcheroo there that comes into play. But thinking about it realistically too, there is a world where, like, if vetoes work the same way they have in the past, and the higher seed gets like the pick of first map, then Carolina's pick for map 4 might not even matter if they get 3-0'd, right? So I don't know. End of the day, I think it's just this matchup has been extremely lopsided all year, and the other element of it now with Rex is, like, I don't want him to, his first 2 CDL matches be stomps against a team that was stomping his previous team with the player that he replaced. So I really, I just hope with the way things work out, we get to see what Rex is really capable of, even if it's just beyond this series. And at the same time, when we're talking Carolina, we got to see what Gwyn is capable of, because the whole Gwinternet thing, LAN versus online performances, that's going to be another topic of conversation if he comes out in this first match and plays poorly, even though it might not necessarily be fair, because they've been getting stomped by LEDs, whether it's online or on LAN. So, yeah, I mean, for a 1-8 matchup that's, extremely one-sided so far this year, there are still multiple facets of this series that I am extremely excited for and interested to see how it plays out. And at the end of the day, it could just be a 20-minute series that's a 3-0 for the Thieves. So gonna be interesting. I do think that will be a big determining factor in Thieves' success at this tournament, because as we saw last event, they lose first round at Major 2, and they have to go on the long losers bracket run, and they make it to Sunday, but they end in 4th place. So, if you win that first winners bracket matchup, I believe you secure top 6. Maybe it's only top 8 technically, but like, it just, things are much easier if you get that first win under your belt. And with the way the landscape of the CDL has shaken out this year now, like in the previous events, let's just be honest, both, I believe Carolina played Vegas Falcons, the all Saudi team, in the first round of the loser bracket both times. That works out well for Carolina, but no matter who the team was, most teams were looking at that as essentially a free win. Now you have a new look Vegas squad. That's not the case. And if you're Thieves, you're kind of, I don't want to say it's a free win, but you're looking at this like things could not have worked out better for them in terms of how the bracket shaked out. Like, they don't have FaZe on their same side of the bracket. I know Miami and Toronto have been playing well, and Toronto did beat Thieves in these qualifiers. But if you are able to win this first match, if you're the Thieves, you set yourself up pretty nicely to make it to the winners finals, if you're playing the way that Thieves team and the talent it has is capable of.
And they probably felt that way at Major 2 as well. They started the number 1 seed, and they just overlooked Boston, or Boston is a bad matchup, or whatever the case may be. But it turned out to be a pretty disappointing result for them. They lose to Boston. I think they get top 6, I believe, at Major 2, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, if Carolina can pull this win off, even if they lose the rest of their matches, I believe that would get them a top 6 finish. That would certainly go a long way as to what I was talking about on the last episode, that if Boston has a pretty good, if they win their first match and they get top 6, that helps them get further and further closer to the Carolina Royal Ravens in 5th place in the CDL standings. So it is very important that Carolina wins at least one match, I believe, at Major 3. it just does not seem likely against LAT to do that in the first round. While you were talking, I was looking up the stats. So 6-0 in hard point for LAT against Carolina. Their only one loss, map loss, is red card S&D. And so they're 4-1 in S&D, 5-0 in control. In terms of the hardpoint maps, Vault has been the most played map, hardpoint map between these two teams. LAT has won all three of those maps, 2 times on Hacienda and once on Skyline. Carolina's best map in hardpoint so far this season has been red card. They're 6-2 on red card hardpoint. Unfortunately, LAT is 6-0 on red card hardpoint, so that might be a reason to not go on red card. But like you said, things haven't worked out, so maybe it is time to see. Maybe LAT is like, all right, we're just not going to play them on that map because we feel confident with everything else.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. But if that's the way, I mean, that sounds like it could be a good showdown. If it's 6-2 versus 6-0, especially it's 6-2 for Carolina, considering how up and down their hardpoint's been this year. Like, maybe I could definitely see that if LATs are like, yeah, we're 6-0 on this map, but if that's their best hardpoint map, we'll just get rid of it and we'll feel comfortable playing them on the other maps, which they evidently are very comfortable because they basically 100-point dub them every time.
Yeah, and the only 2 maps that Carolina is above 500 in a hard point is Protocol and Red Card. They're 6-4 in Protocol, and like I said, 6-2 in Red Card. Neither of those maps have been played in the previous 5 series between these teams. And that might just, again, be LAT saying, hey, like, we're not, like, we probably can beat them. Like, we probably believe that we can beat them in these maps, but why would we give them maps that they're even remotely comfortable on? And so they played a lot of Hacienda, a lot of Vault in these series. So I think the veto process will be very interesting. And I think we can probably tell a lot about how that series will go depending on the maps that get picked. So we might know, half an hour before, like, okay, like this is going to be a real tough series for Carolina, which I think, regardless of any map, I think if LAT probably pick their worst maps, and they probably are going to make it tough on them. But yeah, I'm going to go with LAT. I'm assuming that you're going to go with LAT as well.
Absolutely. So keep that in mind, though. Good work digging that up. If we see a red card hard point or a protocol hard point in this series, it most likely means that at least one of the coaching staffs, but most likely Carolina, is trying something different here in that series. So keep an eye out for that to kick off Major 3.
Next match, we're just going to go down the winners bracket. Miami versus Toronto. Miami has been kind of the darling of the Major 3 qualifiers. Like, you could say the Boston Breach, but Miami beat FaZe. They beat OpTic. They looked like they might even get the number 1 seed, and of course they did tie for first place, but they end up getting into that 4-5 slot. Toronto, on the other hand, was the team to beat Miami, I believe, in these qualifiers. So we're going to get another instant rematch since they just played a week ago. How do you think this goes? Is it just a repeat of what we saw less than a week ago with Toronto beating Miami?
I went with Miami for our pick last time in these qualifiers. I'm leaning towards Toronto now, just with we know what the team's done on land this year and what they're capable of, and it seems like Toronto's playing pretty well at the same time. Same thing with Miami, but at the same time, we haven't seen super on land yet. So that's just going to be something we have to keep an eye on here with this Miami team. But this is definitely, I said it at some points during the last couple weeks now for the online qualifiers. I've been really impressed with this Miami team since Super joined the team on a full-time basis for these qualifiers. I think they look like a totally different team. They've been really competitive in hardpoint and the search. Super in particular has been just a massive upgrade in the search for this team. So the last time we saw these two teams play, that was the one map that Miami won, was a 6-5 in the search. So obviously that could have gone the other way. But the hard points, it was 250 to 240 for Toronto on Vault and 250 to 190 on Protocol. So the worst hard point there is a 60-point loss. So still 2 really close maps. And I'm just, I'm excited to see how this plays out. It was medals, I believe. They played. They were the first match last week on Friday, and then Miami played Minnesota. So I think after the Minnesota match, Medals did a post game interview with the CDL broadcast and said that he really wants a rematch with this Toronto team, and that's how it ends up working out. So maybe the Miami boys are fired up. They got a little bit of you could argue maybe the Major 1 crowd was more of a home crowd buff for them than this event, but it's still kind of a it's at least a Florida adjacent buff for them, maybe with the home crowd. So maybe they'll have the support there. And but I think obviously the matchup that most people are going to be looking at here, at least in my eyes, is Jodeci's versus Real. If either of them are playing at 99 kids level for each of them on their own individual basis, we've seen Jodeci's drop 40 plus kills multiple times in hardpoint this year. We've seen Real go to that Super Saiyan level that I like to say, where he's obviously had some high kill games, but he's all over the place, and he has a lot of games, I feel like, where even if he's not dropping the most kills necessarily, like if Renkor's dropping 35, Real will be right behind him, but Renkor will be like 35 and 20 something, and Real will be like 34 and 33. So like he's all over the place, and he's setting the pace for the team, and he's getting a lot of engagement. So the stat lines might look a little different for what you would consider like a superstar performance for both of these guys, but I think that's the matchup that I'm excited to see how it shakes out, and that could be a determining factor. If Jodeci comes out, is absolutely frying, I could see that being the catalyst for Toronto winning. And at the same time, if Real is able to take things to that next level that we know he's capable of, that could be Miami's recipe for success. And especially just the way the AR duo on Miami has been playing since it's been Super and Renkor. Like if they are playing at the level we've seen online, and then Real kicks things up a little bit, Miami is a really dangerous team in this tournament. So I'm going to go with Toronto for my pick here, but I'm really excited to see how this match plays out too.
It's just a really evenly matched two teams. If you look at how Miami has performed with Super in the lineup in these qualifiers, at least, they're 6-0 in search, and they're just about 500 in the respawn. So they're really letting that search kind of carry them through. And Toronto is kind of in a similar way. They're a little bit above 500 in hardpoint and control so far this season, and they're well over 500 in S&D. They're one of the top S&D teams consistently. So granted, we didn't get to see how a map 5 would go for these two teams last time, but like you said, if Miami, really they kind of let up on that first hard point. They were, I think, up by 35, 40 points, and then Toronto basically full 60s them, and they scored like 60 points, and Miami scored like 9 the rest of the way. So there is kind of a chance that we could see a game 5, and with how great Miami has been in the searches so far, I think that would be very interesting. But yeah, I'm probably going to go Toronto just because of that respawn advantage. Maybe Miami will look different on land, or Super in particular might look different. And Miami has performed, I believe they got 3rd in that Major 1. So we've seen them in the past be able to kind of pick it up a level when they get to these land tournaments. But at the same point, Toronto has also looked pretty good. They looked very good at Major 2. And generally, I would just say they have an advantage. I guess we just haven't really seen enough of Miami to kind of say that, they're definitively going to be better than really a lot of these top teams. So I'm going to go with the Ultra, but I think this is a very intriguing matchup, and it really might come down to a game 5, maybe even a round 11 like it did the first time they played this week. Next up, we got Atlanta versus Vancouver. Actually, I probably should talk about OpTic versus Boston first. I was going down the bracket. So OpTic versus Boston, a matchup I was really not expecting to talk about in this way, because before the season, OpTic was a world championship contender, definitely the top team coming into the season. Boston, of course, was the very last place team coming into the year. And then we immediately saw in that first match of the season, Boston beat OpTic. And I think that was kind of a precursor or like maybe a hint as to what was going to happen the rest of this season, because OpTic has been struggling mightily. They made multiple roster changes at this point and now are still on the brink of not making champs. They do not have like a very easy path to making champs with how this season has gone. Boston, I wouldn't say they have had they don't have an easy path, but Boston is in 6th place and they have a path to 5th place if they continue to perform as they did in these major 3 qualifiers. I don't know which way to go on this because I am a Boston believer. I have been for most of this season. That being said, they have not performed very well at LAN events. Of course, they did beat LAT in round 1 of the winners bracket in Major 2, and then they played some really tough teams and they lost their next 2 matches and were eliminated with the top 6 finish. OpTic has also not performed well on LAN so far this season. They have just been that's been the biggest disappointment. Like even though they did have those really bad qualifiers, like if they were able to make it up on LAN, I think there would be a lot less criticism, and that just has not been the case so far this season. So where are you leaning between OpTic and Boston?
For say the pick 'em, I was pretty much banking on you taking Boston, so I was gonna take OpTic, but I think this is, my kind of theme that I went with in the notes is this has kind of been, for all of these um first round winners bracket matchups, it's a rematch in some sense between the two teams, but this is the one that's the least of a rematch because I think they've only played once, and it would have been at the start of the year when OpTic lost their opening qualifier there, and obviously that was the like first match of the season for them, and that's when they had Pred on the team, and then the whole Pred situation happens. Then the first time where he gets replaced by Hook. Um, so very different roster for OpTic playing Boston this time around, but at the same time, I did see a clip from Scump, like kind of previewing the bracket a little bit, and I believe according to him that Boston reverse swept Vegas to end the qualifiers, and because of the map count and the way OpTic lost to FaZe, Scump like asked his chat if Boston didn't win that, pull off that reverse sweep over Vegas and Vegas beat Boston, OpTic might not have been in winners bracket. So Scump was kind of like, wow, thanks Boston for getting us into winners bracket. Now we got to beat you. And I thought it was just funny that the way that was phrased, but realistically, if you're an OpTic fan or anybody on the green wall, I think this has to be the most favorable first round matchup you could have gotten based on the way OpTic finished the qualifiers and their place in the standings, just because they're the 7 seed. So if you're the 7 seed playing a number 2 seed, in past tournaments, you're most likely looking at a FaZe or LAT first round matchup. But because of the way the tiebreakers shook down and broke down this time around, you get Boston as the 2 seed you're playing. And, I feel like that's the way Boston's been playing, you can't take them lightly or they're going to make you pay for it. But if you're OpTic, you got to think just that there is at least some part of them that's a little happy about how that all worked out for them. But with that being said, I don't think this is an easy matchup for OpTic. I could see them struggling. The only thing that really makes sense in my mind is that OpTic can clutch up in the searches. Boston has not been a good control team. They've looked a little better in control, I feel like, lately. But on the year, they haven't been a good control team. And maybe OpTic has to do a little bit of a Neslo here to, take a 3-2 win over Boston. Maybe that's the path to victory. I don't want to totally discredit their hard point, but I feel like Boston hard point has looked a little better recently as well. And I mean, Boston has just been playing pretty well in general. So this is, like I said, it's a 2-7 matchup where the 7 seed might be a little more comfortable than that separation in the seeding suggests. But at the same time, if OpTic comes out flat or takes Boston lightly and is just thinking along those lines that I'm saying, like, oh, this is Boston, it's not OpTic, or it's not FaZe, it's not LA Thieves that we're playing first round, Boston might smoke them. So it is going to be interesting to see how this shakes up. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but I am excited for this one in the sense of, kind of like you said, OpTic haven't had the best showings on LAN so far this season for different reasons. And they have an opportunity to kind of like rewrite the script with the new roster here. If they get a strong start to this tournament, they will already be on a path to their best LAN placing of the season. And it'll, we'll just have to see how this matchup plays down. But I do think, in terms of the two teams in the first round, I could see this being the match that people like are kind of overlooking in a sense. I don't think that's the right way of wording it, again, because there's just that lopsided Thieves Carolina matchup. But yeah, I think that's the best way of phrasing it is I think this is a 7-2 matchup where the 7 seed might be favored, again, just due to the green wall and how that all works out and popularity contest, yada yada. But end of the day, Boston's been playing pretty good Call of Duty lately, and they have the opportunity to showcase what they're capable of in front of what you presume to be the most watched first round matchup. So could be a good one.
We don't have enough of like tape on this current OpTic team to really give an idea. Obviously, this team, this specific roster, has not been to LAN yet. Each of these players have been to LAN with OpTic, but just never this 4 together. So I think that's kind of a weird situation to walk into. And Boston is not like an easy matchup because they're kind of like evenly matched from what we've seen of this OpTic team and what we've seen of Boston this entire season. The Breach are at their best, like their best game mode is hardpoint, undeniably. They're 25-20 on the season in hardpoint, so a little bit over 500, and they're very competent in that game mode. They're about 500 in search, and like you said, they're not a good control team. What we've seen of this OpTic team in these qualifiers is below 500 in hardpoint, 500 in S&D, and below 500 in control. Obviously, they played some pretty tough teams, Atlanta FaZe being probably the very toughest. And, they are now on a 3-match losing streak because they lost to Miami, who, like we just talked about, had a really great qualifier performance. They lost to Vegas, which did not have a great qualifier performance, but that's kind of shows how weak OpTic has been, and not just this roster in particular. So, and I also looked up just to see, because they played twice. They played in that first match of the season, and they played in the minor, the very first minor. I believe that was OpTic had to beat Vegas, if I'm not mistaken, to play Boston in the second round. And both of those series went to Game 5. In the first series of the year, Boston beat OpTic, like we just talked about. And in that minor, OpTic beat the Boston Breach. But I just was like, obviously they're tied in map count 5-5 because they went to Game 5. But then I looked at the actual maps, and it was hardpoint, Boston and OpTic split 2-2. In search, they split 2-2. In control, they split 1-1. So literally there is no advantage if you're looking at the season series between these two teams. Granted, OpTic is much different. Boston is the exact same team, but exact same roster, but I think they've improved over the course of this season. I will go with Boston because of just they're I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Boston Breach have been more consistent this season than OpTic Texas has, and I can't overlook OpTic's disappointments on LAN, even if it isn't this roster. But I just don't. And I talked about it, I think, even before Major 2. Of course, I'm expecting OpTic to even, make a run toward the grand finals. Maybe they fall a little bit short, but I'm expecting them to go deep into tournaments just because that's the OpTic way. They always kind of find a way. When you're expecting little of them, they go far. When you're expecting a lot, they don't go very far at all. And I'm kind of expecting that at this point as well. Like, I'm picking against them, but I'm fully expecting for them to, win this match and then maybe even beat FaZe or really give FaZe a run for their money in round 2, or maybe Vancouver. We'll talk about it, but like really make a run here. It's just I can't pick them in a match really because I've just seen so many flaws very recently from them.
And the only other thing I wanted to mention, and I forgot, is just the overall CDL point standings and the implications for that with this matchup.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you said Boston is in 6th with 150. I think you already said that, but OpTic is in 8th right now at 130. Cloud9 is in 9th at 105. So they have a 25-point buffer, but between 6th and 8th, it's a 20-point difference. So this match, if Boston wins this match, they give themselves a 30-point cushion over OpTic. If OpTic wins this match, they're tied with Miami at 140, and they are only 10 points ahead, or 10 points behind Boston for 6th place. And so that this could have massive implications for champs, just because there's a big difference there between, it's obvious to say this match has champs implications because whoever loses this goes down to the loser bracket. They are in danger of getting no points at the event, right? But just looking at this one best of 5 match in a vacuum here, it's the difference between a 30-point gap between these two teams in the standings and a 10-point gap. So really big match in terms of the overall standings and champs implications too.
Yeah, like if you get 12th or 9th through 12th, you get 0 CDL points in the majors. If you get top 6, you get 30. And that's huge. That can't be overstated, especially this late in the season. There are only 5 qualifying matches in the Major 4 qualifiers, so there's only 50 points total between those. And then obviously with the Major 4, you have the chance to get a lot more points, but again, you could run, like even say OpTic gets 3rd or 4th in the qualifiers, in the Major 4 qualifiers, they very well could play Atlanta FaZe, they could play Vancouver Surge or Toronto Ultra. They could play some of these very tough teams. Like, look at this, like in the Major 3 qualifiers, Vancouver gets 3rd. What is their reward for getting 3rd? It's playing Atlanta FaZe in the first round of Major 3. So OpTic could be in that, Boston could be in that, and if that's the case, there's a pretty good chance that they could not make champs, because if Boston continues to improve, C9 feels like they're on the verge of a breakout performance at a lot of these majors. Like they could make a run to 4th or 5th place. So it is kind of it's a really big match. It's not going to, I don't think, garner the same attention as like if this was in Major 4. I think a lot more people will be paying attention like because there's no other opportunities after that. But this could ultimately be a deciding factor in where they're seated, or if one of these teams doesn't even make champs at all, which is pretty crazy to think about when you're talking about the Boston Breach and OpTic Texas, the defending world champions. And then in the final match of the winners bracket, we have Atlanta FaZe versus the Vancouver Surge. This is probably the most exciting matchup just based on what we've seen of these two teams against each other. We talked about with Carolina and LAT, that's more like, can Carolina break out of that slump they're essentially in with LAT. Toronto, Miami, it's kind of a test of whether Miami is really that good, if they can kind of make a run. With Atlanta and Vancouver, it's like these are 2 of the top 3 teams in the league, maybe 4 if you're really high on Toronto, but otherwise these are 2 championship contenders playing each other in the first round of Major 3, and we've seen these 2 teams play pretty recently, Vancouver beat them twice in that Major 2 cycle. They beat them in the first match of the Major 2 qualifiers, then in Minor 2, and Atlanta has kind of gotten back at them since then. And Atlanta, of course, won Major 2. They've won Major 1 as well. They're trying to go for a three-peat, or I guess it'd be a four-peat, the conversation that we had after Major 2. But 4 tournament wins in a row on the line for Atlanta FaZe and Vancouver. I don't think the hype is nearly as high as it was right out of the gates with Neptune, but they've been really consistent, honestly, like a lot better than I thought they would be, 7-8 weeks after the roster change. Which way do you think this one goes? Of course, we've been FaZe diehards essentially when it comes to the pick'em. Like, we really rely on them to kind of pick it up. But this is certainly one of their hardest first round matches that I can think of in a really long time.
Yeah, that's what I gotta go with FaZe, but this is I guess you could say it's I'm just gonna scrap that and start over. The way I'm thinking about this matchup is not necessarily like the way the last couple showdowns between them have gone. But just looking at the two teams, I think Vancouver is might be a little tough to say they're undisputed a top 3 team at this point, just because we had 5 teams go 4-1 in these most recent qualifiers. So how much recency bias plays into that, and obviously FaZe wasn't one of the teams to go 4-1. So people might debate that, but regardless, Vancouver, since the addition of Neptune, have been one of the top teams in the league. They showed at Major 2 that their success in the Major 2 qualifiers and Minor 2 wasn't a fluke, and they are here. They're the real deal, and they're here to stay. That being said, they are a really good hardpoint team, and FaZe have not been playing well in hardpoint recently. We went through that last episode, and you did a little mini video on it on the YouTube channel, and we went through the CDL did a graphic on a BZ's stats, which haven't looked good in the Major 3 qualifiers and hardpoint in particular. So we talked about all that, and that's already there, so don't need to repeat that. But regardless, that's Vancouver really good in hardpoint. FaZe haven't been as good in hardpoint of late. Does that tip the scales for the matchup? And for me, the answer is no right now, because it would just mean Vancouver essentially has to win the 3 respawns to prevent it from going to a game 5 where FaZe have just been really strong in search. And maybe that is Vancouver's path. Obviously, if Vancouver wins map 1 and then steals map 2, they are in a really good spot. But that being said, that's where I'm kind of thinking about this series from is if FaZe is able to steal hardpoint, they should have a good path to victory if they continue to play well in search. And if Vancouver is able to steal a search or take the control, then they have a really good path to victory with the way they play hardpoint. So I don't know how much the previous matchups are going to be a factor here. It's going to be more of a question is what FaZe have been able to do since in the short time since the qualifiers to try and fix up their hardpoint a little bit heading into the major. And for Vancouver, maybe it's like a case of that they've played this team before multiple times now. What have they learned from those matchups in order to try and flip the script and maybe a search and take something away there? I don't know. End of the day, though, I am going to pick FaZe here, but this is definitely, I think this is the match I am most excited for in the first round, because I really could see, it going either way. If FaZe come out slipping and still struggling in hardpoint, Vancouver might be able to, cause a bit of an upset, even if it's not technically enough to do the seeding. But yeah, like you said, FaZe playing for the 4P, that's something that I definitely don't think it's happened in the CDL era, and it might not have happened at all since maybe AW with OpTic. I don't even know if OpTic did win 4, because they were they were obviously playing pretty well, but they had a lot of matchups with the FaZe team towards the end of that AW season, and FaZe did win a couple titles then. So I don't even know. Like maybe the last time a team won 4 straight events was like Cole, EG, and Ghosts, or maybe even for Rico and Black Ops 4. So this is FaZe are going for a pretty substantial accomplishment here, especially with all of the talk over the previous years of them getting to grand finals and not getting the job done. Like if they're able to lift another trophy at this event, it's a pretty insane accomplishment.
I think I said it on maybe the last episode or 2 episodes ago, but FaZe has been pretty much unstoppable in search when they get to LAN. I think they've won all but like 1 or 2 maps so far this season, and that's a lot of maps considering they went to a game 7 and a grand finals in Major 1. They obviously went to the grand finals in Major 2. And that's been kind of the biggest difference between these two teams, at least in the, like, I guess you're looking at the online portion. Obviously, we saw these two teams play twice online before Major 2. And then we saw these two teams play twice on LAN at Major 2. And the difference was search. In the online matches, Vancouver won 3-0. They won all 3 of those search maps, and then on LAN, FaZe won all 3 of their search maps. So that was the biggest gap between the two teams. They were 2-2. They split the hard points, both online and on LAN, and then FaZe won both of the controls on LAN, and they were 1-1 online. So not a huge difference in the controls. But like you said, Vancouver has been an excellent hardpoint team. That's by far their biggest strength. That's their key to victory, pretty much against any team. And if FaZe does come out slow, like they have been for a lot of these qualifier series, that's a really concerning thing. And that's actually, I think that's the video for today or for tomorrow. I think I scheduled a video about FaZe and like their struggles. I believe that's for tomorrow, but it'll be.
That's when I went live, I think.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot to break down there, and if you really want to kind of go back and listen to it, I would recommend either listening to the full podcast that we did on Sunday or listening to that video in particular, because I don't know if it is something to actually be concerned about with FaZe. It certainly seems like it, but then they go to LAN and they perform better than they did online, and usually a lot better. So I guess we'll see what happens there. I will go with FaZe like you. I think it's hard to pick against a team that's won both of the majors already, that the last time we saw them at LAN, they beat this team in 2 series. I believe it was 3-2 in the winners finals and then 4-0 in the grand finals. So obviously there's that advantage. And it's hard to pick against a team like that. I would like to try to look up to see what they've, like if they are kind of making history by winning 4 events in a row, and certainly how big some of these events have been. Obviously, the majors are like the only big tournaments that happen during the season until champs, and then Esports World Cup is one of the biggest events in terms of prize money that we've seen in the CDL era, especially. So yeah, I would like to look that up. But this is a really big series, and this could help Vancouver kind of move up the standings as well. It's not nearly as important as that Boston OpTic series because those teams are really just trying to make it to champs, and that's very much in the air. But with Vancouver, they can improve their seeding, and that could go a long way. Right now they're in 5th, but they're not very far away from 4th. Toronto does not have an easy series, it seems like, to start Major 3. I don't see them kind of breaking in to the second place or first place. I don't think they're going to catch FaZe or LAT at this point, but they have a shot to really break in to that top 3 or 4 with a good performance at Major 3.
And I do think too, just in terms of looking at the bracket overall, I think FaZe's situation is a little bit of the reverse of LA Thieves, in the sense of LA Thieves have a really favorable first round matchup, Then if they get to that second round winners bracket, they play either Miami or Toronto. That's a little bit of a harder matchup. If FaZe versus Vancouver is definitely a very hard first round matchup on paper, but if FaZe beat Vancouver, they play Boston. They have had Boston's number all year, and they've looked pretty strong. Obviously, this past match against OpTic was pretty close in some of the individual maps, but they've played pretty well against OpTic too. So FaZe have to be looking at that second round matchup and saying like that's a little bit more favorable than their first round draw, whereas Thieves, they get past Carolina, they are looking at a little bit of a harder matchup, especially if Toronto beats Miami. Toronto just beat Thieves. Like, they can't overlook that. At the same time, though, too, like if Vancouver beats FaZe, I think I would favor Vancouver over Boston or OpTic, no matter who wins that one. And then we're looking at a situation where Vancouver is possibly has a pretty strong likelihood of making it to the winners final. So, obviously, that's just looking at the bracket from a very black and white perspective, but definitely some interesting matchups ahead nonetheless.
I didn't go back to AW, but OpTic did win 4 events in a row of varying degrees of importance, I will admit, in Black Ops 3. So this was back in 2016. They won the Stage 1 playoffs of the CWL, and then they won the Crown Melbourne Invitational, and then they won ESWC, and then MLG Anaheim. So, I mean, even if you don't count Crown, probably, which, ESWC had the least amount of money, which used to be very important. So I don't know if you want to discard one of them, but I do think that would probably count. But like even then, that's 9 years since that happened. I would imagine that they're probably the last team to have done that. I can't think of anybody that would have done it in IW because OpTic won 2 events in a row, and they got second at Atlanta and then won 2 in a row. So they were very close to a three-peat on the CWL Open events. But other than that, I can't really think of anybody that would have done that. So, but yeah, so they could be making history by three-peating. Well, they certainly be making history by three-peating these majors in the CDL. I don't think that's ever happened. And 4 in a row would be about the limit, I would imagine, or very close to it in all of COD esports, especially LAN events, because LAN events were kind of few and far between before like 2015 or 2014, 13.
The only thing that sticks out, I'm pretty sure Farico went 4-0 counting champs in Black Ops 2, because I'm pretty sure that's like Miracle's, like Mir's thing is that he started with 4 straight tournament wins to begin his career. I could be wrong on that, but that's the one I feel like that sticks in my head. I don't even know if Cole and EG technically did it. Maybe Cole did it like end of Black Ops 2 and start of Ghosts, but yeah, regardless, definitely in the CDL era. Maybe Atlanta won 3 majors during Cold War, but there was like the Toronto I think Toronto took Major 2 in Cold War, so there was a separation there. But either way, yeah, we're looking at FaZe. FaZe has an opportunity to do something historic, no matter how you look at it.
All right, so Cole probably has the record, I would imagine. So I just looked it up. Not counting the regional final, which is, I remember this distinctly, where Aches was saying that it was like the champs qualifier.
Is that the one censor one?
Yeah, and he was like, it didn't have any money involved, so it doesn't count. So if you don't count that one, they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 events in a row between Black Ops 2 and Ghosts. Ranging from Gfinity 2 in October 2013 all the way to UGC Niagara, which I believe was the broken or the cut hand event, wasn't that not?
No, that was the first event of AW. That was Columbus AW.
There's something. I think something happened at Niagara, but maybe it was that I think Complexity might have lost like early on in the event and then they came back. But yeah, that's like my heyday. That's the prime memories. But yeah, that's a pretty crazy run. Granted, like a lot of those events are smaller and like we're just kind of discrediting Aches' biggest accomplishments in his entire career because Champs was part of that
never.
Too. But yeah, this is a big event for FaZe and for a lot of these other teams in terms of seeding and really trying to really maybe gain some momentum or get some of the momentum going into those major 4 qualifiers, which will be the last online matches. Like Bink said on the last episode, we only have 3 more weeks of online after this, and this will be the third to last CDL event, LAN event of the season, and fourth to last if you're just talking about EWC as well. The losers bracket teams: Minnesota, LAG, Vegas, and C9. I said this on the last episode, but I will reiterate. So Minnesota plays the loser of LAT and Carolina. We're both expecting it to be Carolina. LAG would play the loser of Miami and Toronto. Vegas plays the loser of Boston OpTic, which either one, honestly, Vegas does have a pretty good shot in that respect. And then C9, I said this on the last episode as well. They got the short stick. They play the loser of Vancouver and Atlanta. Neither team I would necessarily want to play against. That's like one of those things where C9 is literally flying in from LA all the way to South Florida, and they might only play one series and then get back on the flight and go home again, which would really suck for them. Obviously we don't do the predictions. We'll do them like the day of. We'll text between ourselves, and we'll keep track of the pick'em. Any of these losers bracket teams you feel have any sort of shot making a run? Usually there's like a good team that is like down there, and you're like, okay, I could see it. They could win a few matches. This seems like kind of the bottom 4 definitively at the moment, even with some of the Vegas stuff being like, I guess you could throw OpTic in there at points and say like OpTic might be one of these bottom 4 teams, especially because Vegas just beat them. But any shot for any of these 4 teams to get to like top 6, top 4?
Oh, I don't know about that, but I think in terms of the first round of the losers bracket, I think you hit the nail on the head with how I would describe it. I definitely think Cloud9 got the most unlucky draw in this losers bracket, so I don't expect them to advance beyond that. Unless, like, if Vancouver or FaZe somehow get like 3-0 smoked in their first round match and they just lose full, completely tilted, like that's got to be like Cloud9, what Cloud9 hopes for, and then they catch a team that's like down on themselves or a little frustrated. Like maybe that's Cloud9's path to victory there. If we look at LAG, I think the way Miami and Toronto have been playing recently, either team that drops down there should be able to take care of business against LAG. So not expecting them to do much. Minnesota is interesting, assuming Carolina drops down and plays them. I believe Carolina just beat them in a Game 5 Round 11, which has been Minnesota's thing since Kenny joined the roster in these qualifiers. At the same time, that is a little bit of another quote-unquote, not necessarily a revenge match, but like the whole thing around Carolina potentially signing Kenny, and then Kenny doesn't go there. He goes to Minnesota instead. So if it is Carolina versus Minnesota, I think that's an interesting matchup. I'd still, I am high on this Minnesota team. So I do think if it's Minnesota versus Carolina, they have a shot to go on a bit of a run after that, but it's still, it'd be tough. I think the team, which I can't believe I'm about to say this, and I wouldn't have said this at the other events, the team I'm looking at in this first round of the loser bracket is Vegas Falcons, and it's really just because of whichever team drops down, it's a rematch for them. If Boston loses to OpTic, then we just saw Boston reverse sweep Vegas. So Vegas is going to want to, try and get revenge there. And then if OpTic lose and drop down, Vegas is their only win so far is against OpTic. And could you imagine OpTic losing in the online qualifiers to Vegas and Pred, and then Pred gets to do it again on LAN to OpTic and give OpTic a top 12 finish? Like, that would be just bonkers scene. So that matchup, whichever team drops down there, that I have that one circled as the one matchup I'm most looking forward to in the losers bracket. At the same time, though, with even if, let's just say, Vegas beats either Boston or OpTic, they most likely then have to play Vancouver or FaZe, whoever beat C9, and I don't favor Vegas in either of those matchups. So most likely, I guess. In terms of the first round, I'm really looking forward to whoever Vegas ends up playing. But Minnesota is the team I would have to go for in terms of potentially going on a loser bracket run, just because if Minnesota beats Carolina, then they're most likely playing the loser of Toronto, Miami. And although I think Toronto, Miami is better than Minnesota at this point, I think that's a little bit like closer in terms of potentially causing something to happen. As opposed to like Vegas versus Vancouver or Atlanta, where I just like there's no really I don't see Vegas beating either of those two teams, but Minnesota I could potentially see them causing some damage against Miami or Toronto, depending on the form of the teams in a given day.
Yeah, that's probably how I would look at it as well. Like Vegas is the most likely to actually get out of round one, but I mean, to make a run, I think it's probably just Minnesota, like you said, just a slightly easier matchup. Like if Toronto drops down, then it's like, oh crap, you guys are gonna have like a really hard time here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I can pick against FaZe or Vancouver in the losers bracket, even though FaZe did look relatively vulnerable against Vegas in the major 3 qualifiers. It's just kind of pretty hard, especially on land with how FaZe is played. So yeah, there probably no losers bracket runs going at least from these 4 teams. Maybe one of the teams that drops down, especially if LAT, for example, loses to Carolina, then it's like, all right, they might actually make a run through this whole thing. Who are you picking to win this tournament?
You go first, because I said last episode what I said, so ignore what I said last episode and pick, and then I'll pick based on who you pick.
I'm going with FaZe because I haven't seen them lose on land so far this season. But yeah, it's like I think I picked. I might have picked LAT twice, or
you did.
Yeah,
I picked FaZe twice.
Yeah, so obviously it's been not going so well for me in that regard. So I will probably pick FaZe, and then they will eventually lose. So I'm gonna go with FaZe. But it's like there aren't a lot, or I guess there are a lot of wrong answers, but between these two teams, there's not a wrong answer. Even if you wanted to say, hey, Vancouver, they have a real good shot, I wouldn't argue against that. So I think if you picked one of those top 3 teams, then it could, reasonably, it's a reasonable pick, I would say.
Yeah. So I said it last episode, and if you picked Thieves here, I was going to go with FaZe. I've gone with FaZe all season, so we got a little bit of a role reversal. But I got to go with Thieves at this point. I just think they look like the best team right now, and obviously you could have said that heading into Major 2 based on the way Thieves played in the Major 2 qualifiers online and at Minor 2 too. And obviously that didn't work out for Thieves, but I think right now they really are a dangerous team, and it's getting to that point with just I said it at the beginning of the season when this quote unquote super team was formed, like the bar was set at multiple titles, or titles plural, for this LA Thieves team. And so far, obviously 2 majors, FaZe have won both, so they don't have any titles unless you count the minor.
No.
And at the end of the day, so the clock is ticking on this Thieves team to get multiple titles this year, and I think this is got to be one of their best shots, just based on how they've been playing, and like the way that the 2-time, back-to-back champs of this year on Black Ops 6, the way they've looked in Hardpoint recently, I feel like it's like the most vulnerable, but at the same time, again, you look at Thieves or FaZe's search, and that was their recipe for success against Thieves when they faced off at Major 1. So you can't even if Thieves just dominate the hard points, like they got to do something in the searches to eventually get over the hump and beat FaZe. So I think end of the day, I'm picking Thieves as my winner, but I said it last event preview show too. I really just want to see FaZe and LA Thieves go head to head, square off again, and hopefully we get to see it twice. Last event we didn't get to see it at all, and we did get to see 2 really good showdowns between Vancouver and FaZe. But yeah, right now I just think Thieves look really strong. I do think, looking again at the way the bracket shakes out, Thieves have in the top half of the winners bracket, Thieves have the most favorable first round winners bracket matchup, a harder winners bracket round 2 matchup, regardless of whether it's Miami or Toronto. Then FaZe or Surge, they have a harder first round matchup, but an easier uh, second round matchup on paper, whether it's Boston or OpTic that they play. So in that sense, whoever wins Vancouver FaZe uh, could be, on their way to the winners bracket finals, and that could propel them, whether it's FaZe or Vancouver, to a grand finals appearance. So, um, end of the day, I'm really excited to see some good COD this weekend. But I do hope we get to see another LA Thieves Atlanta showdown. Hopefully once, or at least once. Hopefully twice though.
Yeah, I hope that as well. I want that. I want the matchups. I would love to see LAT versus Toronto in winners round 2, just because Toronto, I believe, eliminated LAT from Major 2. Of course, we're going to see FaZe versus Surge. I would love to see that twice if we could again. If Vancouver is able to kind of make that run through the losers bracket, which I would say out of these winners bracket teams, the loser, Vancouver and Atlanta, is like by far the favorite to make that long run, and probably make it to Sunday again. But yeah, it's like I said, there's no wrong picks between Vancouver, LAT, and Atlanta. If you wanted to go with Toronto, I would okay, but I think they're more of a stretch than any of those other three. But even Toronto's still got a really good shot. They've looked a lot better as of late, kind of maybe rounding into form, and this is a pretty good time to do so. But yeah, if FaZe wins, it's kind of a historic win. If Thieves win, then we finally have seen this roster kind of rise to the mountaintop like we expected them to. If Vancouver wins, then I mean, get your Neptune MVP ballots in, because we're cooking for that. Because that would be one of the most insane things to happen, honestly, for him to get picked up after Major 1 and then lead this team, who I think they finished top 12 at Major 1, lead them to a championship at Major 3. So a lot of storylines going into this. Obviously, we've talked about the seeding implications. So please enjoy Major 3 if you're going or just watching on online. If you're going, please be safe as well, heading down to Florida and just being around. Please hand sanitize. I believe everybody gets sick anytime they go to one of these events. Yeah. So please don't get the cod flu, and please wash your hands, I guess. And yeah, we'll be back on Sunday to talk about all of the matches. Again, the reminder of the pick'em, we're both 112 and 60 tied going into the event. I'm sure that would not be the case coming out of the event, but we will be back Sunday night to talk about the matches. See if either of us are right. Probably, since we picked the opposite, we're probably going to be like Vancouver or some way else to win this event. But yeah, we'll be back to talk about everything, break down the matches, and yeah, please like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on, and you can give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Please leave a nice comment as well. We are on all of the podcasting platforms as well as YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. So there have been, tomorrow, by the time that most of you are probably listening to this, we will be 3 days consecutive on the YouTube uploads, so please do so. And there will be a double upload because there will be the podcast, which we were not expecting to do it on this day, but we will have 2 videos going up on Wednesday, April 23rd. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's try to get to 300 by the end of the season. We have like 6-7 weeks or something like that. So please,
you can count EWC.
Yeah, so we're going to extend it to EWC, even though the CDL season might not be in effect, but we're still in season. We're always in season. We're always mid-season form. Follow us on Twitter at JBink with 2 Ks, at Preston Byers, and the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. You can also follow Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2 Ks. And yeah, like I said, we'll be back on Sunday evening. That is April 27th. And I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys, as always, for all the support, everything. Really means a lot to us. And yeah, like Preston said, we talked about it for over an hour now at this point, but a lot of interesting matches coming up this weekend, even beyond the ones that we previewed, just because we obviously don't know exactly what's going to happen. But lots to look forward to this weekend. More LAN Call of Duty, and it's just an exciting time if you're a COD sports fan. So I'm looking forward to the event. Like Preston said, anybody traveling or attending, safe travels. Hope you guys have a good time and be safe, all that good stuff. But yeah, we'll be back on Sunday once a champion is crowned. The last couple times we've gone live pretty quickly after the event ended. Obviously, that'll depend on if there's any delays or how long the championship Sunday lasts. But we should be live pretty quickly after the tournament ends, one way or the other. So hope to see you guys there as soon as we know who won and all that stuff. Enjoy the event, like I said, and remember to send the chow.